As always, before we start, I need to warn you. This episode's gonna get dark. Now, so far, we've spent 6 episodes on this channel examining the topic of revenge. Men who waited years, women who refused to let go, families that cursed themselves for generations. Now, in this channel, we often have this theme where we try to enlarge the boundaries. Every time we build a episode, we reflect upon the previous episodes and what they had in common. So we're going to do the same thing with this one, and every single one of the stories before has one thing in common, and that's that a human being is wronged by another human being. It's a wound with a source you can identify and name. But today, that changes. Today we're talking about a man who was wounded not by another man, but by nature itself, who looked at the indifferent brutality of the natural world and decided that that wound was personal. That aforementioned man took that decision and built it into something so total, so consuming, so magnificently insane that it became the only thing he was. And that decision that he was fully committed to took a whole ship full of men down with him. Now, if you're familiar with older writings, you're probably going to already know what this is. You're going to know that this is Moby-Dick. It was written by Herman Melville in 1851. It's one of the greatest novels in the English language and the most psychologically complete portrait of obsession ever put on page. This episode isn't about whether Ahab was right. It's about what happens to a person when revenge becomes the only reason they have left to exist. Now, before we talk about the whale, we need to talk about the man, because Ahab is not a simple character. He's not a villain in any recognizable sense, and he's not weak or petty or small. He's actually magnificent. Ahab's one of the greatest whalers of his generation. He's got decades of experience at sea, a record that speaks for itself. He's a man whose competence is so complete and thoroughly proven that his crew follows him into the open Pacific on the word of his obsession alone. And that's just his crew. We'll get into his family in just a second, but Ahab's story begins long before the Pequod. Melville tells us that Ahab went to sea as a boy. Now, this wasn't an adventure. It wasn't even a temporary occupation. You gotta understand that to Ahab, the sea was his life. Well, other men built homes, they built businesses, they built communities. Ahab built himself. Voyage after voyage, year after year, ocean after ocean. And by the time we meet Ahab, he spent more of his life looking at horizons than he has at walls. He spent more nights beneath the stars than beneath a roof. And he's spent far more time commanding storms than we all have attending something as simple as family dinners. And to the story that matters here, because Ahab's not just merely a sailor, right? He's one of those rare people you find in life whose professions becomes their reality. It becomes their identity. If you were to all of a sudden take the sea away from Ahab, well, then what would be left? A husband? Yeah, perhaps, a father? Well, certainly. We'll talk about his family life in a second. But in Ahab's mind, he was first and foremost a whaleman, a master of one of the most dangerous professions on earth. He's the kind of man younger sailors pointed at when they wanted to describe what greatness looked like. And for decades, the sea seemed to agree. And we're going to get into the sea in a second. Let's go back and talk about his family life. We were talking about that for a second and drifted off. Ahab has a wife. He has a child. He has life on land that waits for him the way all whaling families wait for their loved ones. And it's with this particular patience, and these people learn that the sea gives back what it chooses to give back, and it keeps the rest. Now, Ahab's also, and Melville makes this clear from the very beginning, he's a man who has always been slightly outside the normal boundaries of human feeling. He's not mad and he's not dangerous, but Ahab's intense in a way that people around him sense without being able to articulate. He's a man who feels everything more completely than most people around him, and he's spent his entire life managing that intensity by channeling it into his work. And after all that love for his occupation and passion in his craft, there's a whale, and it takes his leg. And Melville doesn't say this metaphorically, it's literally. It was a previous voyage. Moby-Dick, the white sperm whale, takes Ahab's leg at the knee and leaves him with a whalebone prosthetic and something far more damaging than a physical wound. It leaves him with a question he can't answer. Why? Not, why did the whale attack? Ahab understands the mechanics of that. Whales fight back when you try to kill them. That's not the question that Ahab has. The question that he has is deeper and darker and way more dangerous. We were talking earlier about Ahab takes it personal. And that question that he has is the personal question, why me? What does it mean that the sea, that the universe singled me out for this? And the answer Ahab arrives at, slowly during a long recovery, during months of staring at the ceiling of his cabin, is the answer that destroys everything. It means something, and the whale is going to answer for it. Now, there's the man. Let's talk about the voyage. First of all, let's talk about the ship. The Pequod is the name of the ship. The Pequod is a whaling ship out of Nantucket. Melville describes this ship the same way you describe something that already knows its own fate. It's decorated with the bones and teeth of whales, built from dark wood, crewed by men from every corner of the world. It's beautiful and ominous in equal measures. And Ahab takes command of the Pequod. And for the first part of the voyage, he stays below. He hides in his cabin. He lets the ship operate normally, letting the crew settle into their rhythm, letting everyone believe that this is a standard whaling voyage with a standard commercial purpose. And then, one morning, he comes on deck. Now, in this podcast, we've got the privilege of going over some of the most powerful pieces in literature, right? And we've got to expound on why they are still significant in today's realm. This has been all over the world, all over different timelines. We've got 2,500-year-old Greek writings. We have up-to-date, recent 21st century writings with Gone Girl, and everything in between. And once again, that same piece that's attached to it, the same importance, comes into this episode. And Melville's description of the moment that Ahab comes on deck is one of the most powerful pieces in American literature. Now, you can try to picture this. Ahab, emerging from below, comes on deck, right? His whalebone leg is striking the deck. His face is bearing the particular expression of a man who's already decided everything, not only for himself, but for his crew. And it's the moment that the voyage changes, and unfortunately for the crew, none of them has this full understanding that it has already changed. He nails a gold coin onto the mast. It's a Spanish doubloon. It's gleaming. It's impossible to ignore. And he tells his crew that the first man to sight Moby-Dick will have that coin. And before we go on, I wanted to give you a little bit of an understanding of what that would cost in today's world. So a Spanish doubloon, right? If you think about it, it was worth $16 back then. Now, what does it equal to today? About $4,000 to $8,000. They said a Spanish doubloon would be able to purchase 800 fine cigars. So if you take the value of what a cigar would cost, and for the cigar connoisseur out there, you're going to laugh at this number, but it's about $5 to $10 for a cigar. So that the balloon is somewhere in the value of about $6,000 to $7,000 if we get there. So just think of somebody getting $6,000, $60, $100 bills and nailing that to the post right there. And you're all of a sudden, your eyes may perk up a little bit more than just a Spanish coin. There was a recent doubloon that sold at an auction that I think it sold for about $20,000 if I remember doing my research for this assignment more recently. And that's what it went for now. But back in the day, it would have been closer to about $7,000 to $8,000 for our understanding of what the valuation of that coin would be. Now, if you picture in your mind's eye with me real quick, think about this. You see one of the most powerful people on the ocean posts $7,000 and then says, let's find this thing, and whoever finds it gets this reward. You see the crew respond the way crews respond to charismatic certainty. They respond with excitement. They respond with noise. But I think most importantly, they have this collective surrender of individual judgment to a powerful personality. They're not just wanting the money. And this is where I think that we have to really have a deep compassion for the crew. Behind the scenes, Ahab is so willing to get revenge on this whale that he's willing to risk the crew, but the crew doesn't understand that yet. They're just thinking they know Ahab to be a powerful person, and they want to get on his good side. They want the richness of knowing that they helped this powerful personality achieve the goal that he has. And it's their dedication to him that's causing this cheerful obedience. And out of that cheerful obedience, they cheer. Except for one person. One person doesn't cheer. That's First Mate Starbuck. Starbuck's the moral center of the novel. He's the one man on the Pequod who sees clearly what Ahab is doing and has the courage to say it directly. To be enraged with a dumb thing, Captain Ahab, seems blasphemous. Now, Ahab responds to this accusation, and Ahab's response, delivered with the full force of his magnificent, monstrous certainty, is that everything has a face behind it. That the whale is the visible agent of something deeper and more malevolent, that striking at the whale is striking at that dark thing. And he says, "Talk not to me of blasphemy, man. I'd strike the sun if it insulted me." And Starbuck has no answer for this, and neither do we, because we are encouraged the same way that Ahab encouraged his crew when devoting them to a cause. All you have to do is teach the crew that the whale is evil, and the crew will respond in kind. It's not the desire for revenge that is evil. It's the whale itself. And when you deflect off of the revenge being evil onto the whale being evil, it's very easy to manipulate the crew into wanting to go down with you. So that's how we look at that. We don't have an answer for this because we're manipulated the same way the crew was manipulated. And so now we're going to go from the ship to the hunt. And the Pequod hunts. They spend months at sea. Other ships encountered, other whales killed for their oil. The legitimate commercial work of the voyage continues alongside Ahab's private war. And you got to see that the crew lives in two realities simultaneously. The normal reality of sailors at sea, and then there's the reality of men in service to an obsession they have agreed to share without fully understanding what they agreed to. And like I just said, we can't judge too harshly because we do the same thing without having empathy for the other side, without having a desire to see the revenge as malicious, not the person or the object. And now we get to the story where we actually get to see the physical manifestations of what the desire of revenge does to a human being. We see the degradation of Ahab's mental awareness as well as physical awareness. And the first part we see is he barely sleeps. He stands on deck in all weather, He charts, he calculates, he thinks about the whale with the totality of a man who's given everything else up. So let's take a moment to see what he's giving up here just to get revenge. We know he's a family man. We know that he has a wife and a child, and they're obviously on shore, and so we know that he thinks of them less and less, right? He no longer cares about going back to them. He is fully dedicated in taking this ship down for revenge. So there's the family piece. Then we also see the gold coin on the mast, and that's not because it has any monetary value to him. It's because of what finding the whale means. And here's what it means to Ahab, and this is the psychological center of the entire novel. Ahab is a man who built his entire identity on mastery. And we're talking mastery of the sea, mastery of his crew, mastery of the hunt. It's like for decades that the world confirmed what Ahab believed about himself, and that he was exceptional. He really was the best at what he did. And we also see that his will could impose itself on his environment, that the universe responded to competence and determination. And we talked about this a little bit in the Amy Doon story, where the whole story hinges on the world responding to her competence and level of determination that she had in blaming her husband for her own murder. She has developed this scheme that he will go down for murder, and it's all due to her same competence and determination for the revenge that Ahab has here for Moby-Dick. And if you could give a little bit of empathy to Ahab, you see a very competent man, and he's driven by his career, he's driven by success, he's driven by the desire to obtain order in his universe, right? So we see him go out and we see him master his own fate in a way. And then the whale takes his leg. And this is the first time that Ahab realizes that the universe isn't dedicated to him. He's not the master of it. The universe doesn't respond to anything that Ahab goes through at this time. The universe, through the whale, takes his leg. He takes it randomly, indifferently. It takes it without meaning or message or acknowledgement of who Ahab was or what he had built or what he deserved. And that indifference is what Ahab can't survive. And it's the same thing that Medea went through with Jason. So if you take a listen to the second episode, or if you're coming from the second episode, or if you've listened to it in the past, you'll understand that Medea couldn't put up with Jason's weakness. She falls for him. She leaves everything behind to follow him. And she has to do some dark things in order to get away from her kingdom. And like I said, if you haven't listened to it, please go to listen to it, because it is an amazing episode on what happens when someone cannot tolerate an aspect of another person, or in this case, in Ahab's case, the universe, that they retaliate in kind or above kind in this way. And so let's get back to Ahab. And we see that the indifference is what Ahab can't survive. It's not the physical wound, it's not the pain, it's not the humiliation of losing his leg or even looking lesser to people because he wasn't mastery of the sea or the whale or the universe. But it's the indifference that gets to him. Because if the universe is indifferent, if there's no meaning behind what happened to him, then everything Ahab built his life on is a story he told himself. And Ahab would rather die chasing a whale than live with that possibility. And so just to skip ahead into the next segment, we'll just say that he finds the whale. And we know he didn't find it through luck. He found it through certainty. He had this absolute refusal to stop. It was his willingness to push the ship and the crew past every reasonable limit that they found the whale, they found Moby-Dick in the Pacific Ocean. And what follows that finding is 3 days of pursuit that Melville renders as something between a battle and a religious experience. And Melville breaks this down into 3 days. Day 1, Ahab lowers his boat to join the hunt. Him and his crew, they find the whale. The whale turns and it decimates the boat. It splinters it. The crew goes flying. They're in the ocean. Ahab, that little bit of whalebone leg that he had, is gone with it. And now Ahab, in his humility, is being pulled back up to the Pequod. He's pulled back up to the main ship. And after he's pulled up, he demands a new leg be fashioned from spare bone, and on top of that, he demands that they continue. But unlike any of the previous episodes, we get to see something fantastic in here, and it's almost biblical. Ahab gets a warning. He was warned before, but he gets a second warning here, and Starbuck, the first mate, comes up to him at night and he says, "It's not too late. You can turn the ship around. The crew has families. You have a family. I have a family. Do what's right here." And Ahab listens to that. But instead of heeding the warning, he continues. So now we get to day 2. They find the whale again. The pursuit is closer now. Ahab can see it. He can read its movements. He can feel the proximity of the thing that's given him everything to reach this whale. The whale turns again, and it destroys more boats. It takes more men. The Pequod itself is now severely damaged. And one more time, Starbuck tells Ahab that the ship cannot survive another day of this, and that is grace being poured upon Ahab to say, if you stop with your revenge, you can have the blessing of life, because if you continue with this, it's going to take you and everybody down with it. And so Ahab listens to that and decides again that his revenge wins out, and he continues. And so now we're to day 3. Moby-Dick rises from the ocean like something that's been waiting, and it now attacks the Pequod directly. It rams the ship, and before it damaged it a little bit, but now it's struck the ship 3 times, and the Pequod begins to sink. The crews scramble, the men go into the water. And instead of getting into the water and trying to swim away and hoping for safety, Ahab finds a harpoon and he throws it at the whale. And it strikes the whale. And the line, the harpoon line coiled in the boat, catches Ahab around the neck as it runs out, and Ahab is pulled from the boat into the ocean, into the depths, toward the whale, and the whole Pequod sinks. Every man on board goes down with it, and the ocean closes on everything. And this is the thing about indifference. The whale doesn't celebrate. It doesn't look at Ahab and say, "I got you." It is completely indifferent. As massive and white and ancient as it is, it's indifferent. And the whale, it swims away. And so here's the question Moby-Dick's been asking since the first page. What happens when revenge becomes the only reason you have left to exist? Well, let's look at what Ahab actually had done before the whale. A family, a reputation, a life's work he was genuinely exceptional at. He had a crew that respected him, a future on shore that was waiting. And now, let's look at what he trades all of that for. Just 3 days of pursuit. He finds a harpoon, and that harpoon finds its mark, and then everything finds the ocean. By any external measure, Ahab loses completely. He dies, his crew dies, his ship is gone, his family will never see him again, and on top of that, the indifferent whale, the thing that he was hunting, the thing that he traded everything in for, it survives. And so here's what Melville's really showing us. And this is so cool because it takes Moby-Dick from just a story about a whale, a man, a boat, and a capsized boat and a crew going down. It's what makes this story true literature. And it's the fact that Ahab doesn't lose the thing he was actually protecting. What Ahab was protecting from the moment the whale took his leg until the moment the harpoon line took him was his meaning. His sense that the universe was not indifferent, that what happened to him mattered enough to respond to, that he was significant enough to be targeted and therefore significant enough to fight back. The pursuit of Moby-Dick isn't really about the whale. It's about Ahab's refusal to accept randomness. He has this refusal to accept that the universe didn't single him out, that the whale simply fought back the way whales fight back. That his suffering had no more cosmic significance than the suffering of any other creature on any other day in any other ocean. And again, in different episodes, we get to talk about the psychological behavior in something that's this committed. And this would come by way of behavioral psychology. And behavioral psychology tells us this about the story. Human beings are meaning-making creatures. We're wired deeply neurologically to find patterns, to assign cause, to construct narratives that explain our suffering. And it's not a weakness that we have this. It's one of the things that makes us functional. But when that meaning-making goes wrong, when the narrative we construct to explain our suffering becomes more important than the life we're living, it becomes what psychologists call existential obsession. It's when the wound stops being something that happened to us and it becomes who we are. Ahab's not a man seeking revenge against a whale. Ahab's a man who found in the whale the only thing that made his wound feel significant rather than random. And significance, even the significance of being the target of something monstrous, is better than meaningless. And that is why Ahab takes his crew down with him. And it's not because he doesn't care about them. Melville actually shows us in the story moments of genuine tenderness that Ahab had for his crew. He shows us Ahab holding the cabin boy Pip. He shows us Ahab's brief aching acknowledgement of what he's costing everyone in this journey, and that's that their lives will end. And so it really isn't that he doesn't care. It's just that his revenge on the whale means more to him than his crew does. And unfortunately for his crew, that obsession for revenge has replaced everything. If it replaced his wife and child and duty and reason and survival, then it definitely replaced them. That obsession was the last thing standing between Ahab and the knowledge of what happened to him meant nothing to a cold, indifferent universe. But there's one more final devastating truth that Melville leaves us with, and that's that the whale doesn't even know Ahab exists. It never did. It attacked a boat the way whales attack boats. It defended itself the way whales defend themselves. And it swam away the way whales swim away. Ahab had spent everything, his leg, his sanity, his crew, his life, pursuing a creature that was never his enemy. Pursuing a meaning was never there. And think about that compared to the last episodes. Edmond Dantes built his revenge on a real wound inflicted by real people who made real choices. Medea's rage was directed at a man who genuinely betrayed her. Amy Dune's plan, it targeted someone who was actually culpable. Atreus responded, however monstrously, to a genuine act of betrayal. And Emily Grierson was shaped by damage that was real and documented and specific. But Ahab built his entire final chapter on a wound inflicted by indifference. And the most disturbing thing about Captain Ahab, the thing that makes Moby-Dick the most psychologically honest book Dark Margins has examined, is that we understand him completely. Because all of us have looked at something that hurt us, something random, something indifferent, something that had no malice and no message, and we wanted it to mean something. We wanted someone to be responsible. We wanted a whale to chase. But thankfully, most of us don't have a ship. But unfortunately, Ahab did. And if you want more of Moby-Dick, it's 135 chapters. It's a long book. It's over 200,000 words, but the chapters that matter, and there are many, are some of the most extraordinary prose in the English language. Start with chapter 36, the quarterdeck, the gold coin, the speech. Read that chapter and you'll understand everything about Ahab in 20 minutes. I'll do my best to link it in the description. But enough about Moby-Dick. We've been on this episode for over 30 minutes. Let's talk about next time. Next time, we leave the ocean and go somewhere colder. It's a revenge story set in the drawing rooms of Victorian England. It's about a woman who was left on the altar on her wedding day and decided that the entire institution of love deserved to pay for it. Well, for the rest of her life, anyways. You're going to want to subscribe because next episode is the most dangerous person Dark Margins has ever examined. And she never even has to leave her house. I'm Bobby Garrison, and this is Dark Margins. I'll see you in the next chapter.